In 2020, the New York Jets were in the driver's seat for Trevor Lawrence. All they had to do was simply just lose. But this is real life. Players play hard, and unless it comes from management or coaching, it's hard to throw away games on purpose, just ask the Texans. Although the Jets did have a moment that 2020 season where it legitimately looked like they were tanking the game on purpose on the last defensive play call. Anyway, the Jets started off 0-13 in 2020, and coming off a 40-3 loss at Seattle, it looked like they'd be the first winless team in the NFL since the 2017 Cleveland Browns. But then, something very unexpected happened. The 0-13 Jets won back-to-back games and finished the season 2-14. And it's not like those two wins came against teams with nothing to play for. They beat the Rams, who finished 10-6 that year, and the Cleveland Browns, who finished 11-5. You just can't make it up sometimes. Instead of the Jets winning the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, a prospect that was compared to Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, and many other great quarterbacks, the first overall pick now belonged to a team that ironically started out the season 1-0 and never won again. That would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. And as I said, you can't expect players intentionally losing games on the field, but two meaningless wins by the Jets at the end of that 2020 season proved to be pretty detrimental 2 years later. And being from the New York and New Jersey area myself, I was kind of hoping that T-Law would end up in green, not teal. Now all we have is numerous photoshops of Trevor Lawrence in Jets jerseys. Oh, what could have been. But on the bright side, the Jets now had the second overall pick, and they got to pick from a quarterback class that was unanimously recognized as one of the best quarterback classes in years. After Lawrence, there were 4 other quarterbacks that could have went second overall, and nobody would have been shocked. You had the accomplished Mac Jones, an older-fashioned pocket passer who seemed more NFL ready than most other guys, and just came off winning a national championship. You had Justin Fields, who unfortunately had the all-Ohio State quarterback suck in the NFL label with him, although he had ridiculous stat lines and had an NFL-ready body type. You had Trey Lance, the Division II quarterback that had not played in 2020 due to COVID, but had all the tools to potentially blossom into the next Josh Allen type guy if things panned out. And then there was Zach Wilson. Wilson was a late bloomer. He wasn't really high on anyone's draft rankings until his junior year. Wilson was fine as a freshman in 2018, but nothing too crazy. In 2019, he suffered a couple of injuries to his shoulder and hand, and put up by far his lowest passer rating and most turnovers in any of his 3 college seasons. Then entering his junior year, it all changed. Wilson wanted to be great. In a story on The Ringer, it was reported that Zach made his family switch from Comcast to YouTube TV in order to have unlimited DVR storage. And why, you may ask? It was to watch Joe Burrow film. Burrow was actually a pretty similar case in some ways. Burrow was a guy projected to be a 5th or 6th round pick entering his final college season, but we all know about the incredible leap he took at LSU in 2019 en route to a national title. Wilson spent hours studying Burrow's game and even Aaron Rodgers. And Wilson flourished, finishing the 2020 season with 3,692 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions, completing 73.5% of his passes. And a guy who wasn't on many people's radars in the summer was all of a sudden a household name by winter. Now, based on what I said earlier, we all knew the Jaguars were going to take Trevor Lawrence first overall. But for the Jets at number 2 overall, they had quite a few options. Did they want to go with a safer prospect like a Justin Fields or a Mac Jones, or a player with a higher yet unknown ceiling? Jets general manager Joe Douglas was technically in his 2nd year with the team, and the quarterback he inherited, Sam Darnold, wasn't exactly working out. Douglas and new Jets head coach Robert Saleh knew it was time to get their guy at 2nd overall in a class littered with quarterback talent. A little under a month before the 2021 draft, the Jets dealt Darnold to Carolina for a few draft picks, including a 2nd rounder in 2022. It was at that point where it was a guarantee the Jets were going to go with a quarterback 2nd overall. And throughout most of April, based on the rumors, there was no doubt of who it was going to be. It was Lawrence to the Jaguars and Wilson to the Jets. Those two seemed to be the free spaces on everybody's mock draft, barring something unforeseen. Now, of course, Zach Wilson did have some risk. With a 6'2", 214-pound frame, he definitely didn't have the size you prefer when it comes to quarterbacks. But seeing the recent success of Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, and especially Kyler Murray that year, it made Wilson stature seemed like not much of a concern at all. There were some other concerns like, well, what was his competition level in college? What if he gets injured again like 2019? And we haven't seen him under pressure much because his offensive line at BYU was amazing. But in reality, almost every single quarterback prospect you scout has their flaws. The argument to take Zach Wilson, though, was mostly due to his upside. He had a lower floor than just about any of the other top 5 quarterbacks, as we can see now 2 years later, but arguably had the highest ceiling and potential after Trevor Lawrence. So that's what Joe Douglas decided to do. With the 2nd overall pick in the 2021 draft, the Jets selected Zach Wilson. Unfortunately for Zach Wilson, the Jets may have damaged him before even taking his first NFL snap. Most times when you draft a young quarterback, you'd like to have a veteran or sometimes 2 veterans behind that young quarterback just to take the pressure off them and be a mentor. Well, for the Jets entering Wilson's rookie year, they did the complete opposite of that. The most experience in passing the ball in the NFL for the 2021 Jets quarterback room wasn't even a freaking quarterback. It was their wide receiver Jamison Crowder, who at that point had 2 career passing attempts. The Jets, of course, did eventually acquire Joe Flacco, who they let walk the offseason prior, which was pretty puzzling, but quarterback mentorship was something lacking from Zach Wilson for most of his first year. In his first season, it was a mixed bag, to put it nicely, but you did see enough to realize why he was taken so highly. I remember a game early in the season in Wilson's first career win versus Tennessee in overtime, and he made 3 throws in that game where he said to yourself, wow, I don't know how many quarterbacks could have made that throw. His arm talent was off the charts, and still is to this day, of course, but it was just the other things he had a very hard time with. He had the ability to hit the home run ball, but had a hard time getting singles, if I can make some sort of baseball analogy. Zach struggled with passes behind the line of scrimmage and really passes within 20 yards. But on passes over 20 yards is where he actually found some success based on his next-gen passing chart and graded a 66 according to PFF on 20-plus yard attempts. Wilson went 3-10 as a rookie, but as I said, he did show enough flashes for excitement heading into year 2. He did sustain a PCL injury in week 7 at New England that caused him to miss 4 games, and durability, of course, was one of the concerns on Wilson coming out of BYU. But after his rookie season, his head coach Robert Saleh seemed all in, crediting him for finishing the year strong and complimenting his growth throughout the year. I think his development over the course of the year has been spot on. I think the things we've wanted him to get better at, he's gotten better at. The 2022 offseason happens and the Jets offense looks locked and loaded with Wilson entering year 2. A familiar scheme, a stud wide receiver in the draft, a stud running back, a couple of very solid tight ends, and the remaining playmakers from last year like Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. Everything seemed to be going right last offseason for Zach. He put on muscle, he traveled to meet with his receivers and practice with them throughout the offseason, and had the reputation of a likable teammate at that point. There was this one weird report about how Garrett Wilson preferred Joe Flacco's passes, but I did not think much of that. He did allegedly have a run-in with a cougar or two, not the BYU mascot, but we'll leave that part out of it. But unfortunately, it seemed likely for about 48 hours that Zach Wilson's 2022 season was never going to happen at all. A scary non-contact knee injury in preseason versus the Eagles left Jets fans in a panic. It sort of looked like the Kyler Murray torn ACL play from last month, and you even had most fantasy doctors on Twitter already saying that Wilson tore his ACL for sure. But the MRI said otherwise, and instead of missing the entire season, Zach would only miss the first 3 games that season with a torn meniscus. Now, if I told you the Jets went 4-0 in Wilson's first 4 starts and even got to 5-1, you'd probably think he took the year 2 leap, but that's not exactly how it went. In his first 6 games of 2022, Wilson had 5 total touchdowns but 6 total turnovers while completing an underwhelming 57% of his passes. But as I said, the Jets were winning, so it was sort of brushed under the rug. But that whole brush it under the rug thing came to a crashing halt as Wilson put up a stat line of 77 passing yards on 22 attempts and 3 offensive points at New England. The Patriots handed Zach his 1 loss up until that point, and the Jets' Week 11 loss at New England was downright embarrassing. Chances are that Robert Saleh would have stuck with Zach Wilson despite the awful performance, but it was his comments or lack thereof after the loss. In the postgame, a reporter asked Zach, "Do you think you let your defense down at all?" And Zach quickly responded with an adamant no.
As an offense, though, I mean, when you guys are only able to score 3 points, the defense only lets up 3 points. I mean, do you feel like you let the defense down at all?
No.
Thank you.
Now, I'm no football guru, but when your defense holds the opposing offense to 3 points for the entire game and you only score 3 points yourself offensively, I would say you let your defense down, Zach. It was technically the Jets' special teams that lost them the game, allowing the game-winning punt return for a Patriots 10-3 win, but the Jets' offense was abysmal. So abysmal that in the second half, they averaged 2.7 inches per play in the second half, not yards, inches. 2 yards in the entire second half. Based on Zach's lack of accountability and immaturity and horrid half of football, Robert Saleh turned to Mike White as the Jets starter in their next matchup versus Chicago. Wilson was then made inactive for 3 straight games, but a bad ribs injury for Mike White allowed Wilson to get his starting job back in Week 15 versus the Lions. And Wilson actually did bounce back and had over 300 yards and a couple touchdowns, and even threw the go-ahead touchdown late in the fourth to go up by 4 points. Unfortunately, the Jets did blow that game due to a 4th down defensive breakdown and bad clock management by Robert Saleh himself. But just when you thought that 3-week break may have given Zach much needed time off, the Jets had a quick turnaround on Thursday Night Football at home versus the Jaguars. And honestly, this game felt like the Zach Wilson funeral. It was cold, raining, the Jets only scored 3 offensive points, losing 19-3, and Zach Wilson was so bad he was booed and replaced by an undrafted quarterback. And that was the final time we saw Zach in 2022 as head coach Robert Saleh believed he needed time away from football for a bit, which is the last thing you want to hear about a guy you just invested a 2nd overall pick in not even 2 years ago. The Jets season ended in massive disappointment after starting 7-4, dropping their last 6 games and finishing 7-10. With the team collapse and Zach Wilson being right at the center of it, there have been plenty of rumors of the Jets quarterback position in the offseason. Due to the Raiders' fallout with Derek Carr, I recently shared my opinion about that, but the Jets seem like a very suitable option for him based on a win-now roster and needing a quarterback. But recently, it seems like the Jets may be shooting for more than just Derek Carr. The Jets recently switched offensive coordinators, and the man they hired just came off a debacle of a season in Denver, but it's Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett, of course, before going to Denver, was the quarterback's coach for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay from 2019 to 2021. Although it would take multiple draft picks to acquire Rodgers at age 39, the Jets did once take a chance on another Packers legend 15 years ago who happens to play the same position. It'd be a full circle ending considering Zach Wilson studied Rodgers' film before entering the NFL draft. In that case though, would the Jets trade Wilson at his lowest possible value, or would they keep him as a backup while taking up $9.5 million in cap space? It'd be a decision that I would not want to make, that's for sure. Robert Saleh already said the Jets are committed to bringing in a veteran quarterback this offseason, and I think that's the right thing to do. Entering 2023 with a shaky Zach Wilson, Mike White, and washed up Joe Flacco would have been a horrible idea with a win-now roster. If they are able to acquire Rodgers with those weapons, a hopefully healthy offensive line if Mekhi Becton makes it back, and a defense that was top 5 last year, they'd be in the Super Bowl conversation. With Brett Favre in 2008, the Jets started 8-3, and he was playing very well until a torn bicep injury to Favre just destroyed the team and they lost their last 4 out of 5 games. In an alternate universe where Favre stays healthy and Plaxico Burress does not shoot himself, maybe the Giants and Jets would have met in the Super Bowl in 2008. For some reason, I just think Rodgers does end up with the Jets. Of course, he could retire and could play for nobody, but with Jordan Love entering year 4 now, you'd have to think that something has to happen. Another year on the bench for Jordan Love at this point just does not make too much sense. And if you can get a couple of first rounders for a 39-year-old quarterback, I mean, you might as well do that. And for the Jets, you have a win-now roster. Your only reason for missing the playoffs last year was your quarterback position. So if you're the Jets, why not take a shot on getting Aaron Rodgers, who won 2 MVPs in 2 of the past 3 years? It's going to be interesting, but we'll see what the future holds. But I don't think this is Wilson's last chance to start, whether it's with the Jets or somebody else. That will do it. Remember to like and subscribe and comment for more videos like this. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you guys next time.